What is up, guys? Today we're going to be talking about some awesome smartphones with a Snapdragon 865 chip, so you can get a very powerful phone, and some of these phones are at some really great prices right now. So starting with the Galaxy S20 Plus, this phone is a really nice phone, hovering around $500 to $600, and it comes with all the bells and whistles. And just like every phone on this list, it's extremely still fast and very powerful. So you have a full premium design on here. It's aluminum frame, glass back on here. It's also IP68 dust and water resistant. You actually have a 1440p 6.7-inch display. It is 120 Hz dynamic AMOLED display, 525 for the PPI. Overall, it's just a beautiful display. So that was one of the things that just popped out when I first got the phone. Very slim bezels, punch hole. Overall, just a beautiful viewing experience on here. Now, of course, you got Android 11 with the latest One UI, Snapdragon 865, and the Adreno 650. Again, all of these phones on this list are going to be very powerful for gaming. So any phone or any game that you want to play on these phones is going to be very powerful. Fortnite, Call of Duty, whatever you throw at it, it's going to be able to max it out. So you do have micro SD support, 128 gigs of internal storage, and 8 gigs of RAM on here. You also have stereo speakers on here, which sound very loud, very crisp and clear, good bass. This phone does not have a headphone jack, so do note that. And you also have NFC on board with a fingerprint scanner under the display, and it comes with all the bells and whistles like the Samsung desktop experience as well, which is really fun to play with. I see that this phone still has flagship quality cameras, a quad camera setup, 12 megapixel standard, 64 megapixel telephoto with a 12 megapixel ultra wide, and also a 0.3 depth sensor, 8K video, and then you have a 10 megapixel selfie that shoots in 4K, 30 or 60 FPS. And the images come out really good on here. You have really good color on here, good detail. The ultra wide does a good job. You get really good depth of field on here. You get really good zoom on here with the telephoto. So overall, I was a big fan of the cameras on this smartphone. Now this phone also has pretty decent battery life as well. A 4,500 milliamp battery, 25 watt fast charging, along with wireless charging and reverse wireless charging as well. So I can charge another device with this phone, which is pretty cool. So overall, really nice. I really love the color options on this phone as well. Overall, just a solid buy. Next is the Asus ROG Phone 3. This is also a really awesome choice to consider. It's also a gaming phone, so if you're more geared towards gaming on your phone, this will be really great too. It's an aluminum frame, glass back, and then you have the really cool RGB light, which you can customize any color you want, and it has that gamer type of look to it, which I think is really awesome. It goes great with anybody who has a gaming setup. You do have an AMOLED display on here at 144 hertz, so it's just crazy smooth. It's a 1080p panel at 6.59 inches. You also have 391 for the PPI. Overall, it's a very nice looking panel. There's no notch or punch hole or anything, because you actually do have front facing stereo speakers, which are extremely loud. Still one of the best speakers I have personally heard on any smartphone, so those are awesome. You also have on Android 10, I'm sure this will get Android 11, the Snapdragon 865, and then the Adreno 650 on here. Again, this phone is going to be a beast for gaming, and I believe that's the 865 Plus if I'm not mistaken. So you do not have micro SD card support, which I was scratching my head on that decision, but you have 128 gigs of internal storage and 8 gigs of RAM on here, or you can bump it up to 12 gigs of RAM and 256, just depends on which configuration. This phone also has no headphone jack, so do note that. You also have NFC, and the under the display fingerprint scanner is very fast, so I had no issues with that. But this phone has a massive 6,000 milliamp battery on here, and it is just crazy fast. You also have reverse charging on here, which is pretty cool. Charges at 30 watts, and this phone is probably one of the best battery life phones that I have. It just lasts all day. It is extremely fast phone, even with 144 hertz on, so very impressive for battery life. And I guess the cameras are okay on this phone. I would say it's the weakest part of this phone. And it's a 64 megapixel standard, 13 megapixel ultra wide, 5 megapixel macro, and it shoots in 8K, 24 megapixel selfie. And the cameras are fine. It's not terrible. It's just, I think compared to the rest of the phones on this list, it probably has the weakest camera out of all of them. But again, if you're a gaming type of person, you might not care about the camera. So it's still an excellent buy. Next is the Sony Xperia Mark II. So this is an awesome phone. and I'll have all the prices down below to where you can buy. And I still really like this phone. You have an aluminum frame on here, glass back. You also have on here IP68 dust and water resistant. This is the only phone on the list with a 4K display. So if you're really into watching high quality videos on your phone, this is definitely something to consider. Running Android 11, Snapdragon 865 on here, Adreno 650. So you know it's gonna blaze through anything, games and all that stuff. But that display on here is crazy. I am awaiting the Mark III. It's gonna have the same display just with 120 Hz, which is gonna be crazy. You do have micro SD support, 256 gigs of internal storage and 8 gigs of RAM, and that is on the base model. You also have stereo speakers on here, as well as a 3.5mm headphone jack. So it's actually one of the rare phones on here with a headphone jack. You do have NFC as well as a physical fingerprint scanner side mounted, and you also have a 4000 milliamp battery with 21 watt fast charging with wireless charging at 11 watts. And you do have very good cameras on here, a 12 megapixel standard, a 12 megapixel telephoto, and a 12 megapixel ultra wide, and a 0.3 depth sensor. If you didn't know, Sony actually makes a lot of the lenses in smartphones, so they usually have very good cameras in their smartphones, 4K video. And then you also have an 8 megapixel selfie camera that shoots in 1080p. So overall, the Sony Xperia Mark II is definitely a very attractive buy here. One pick for me personally is the LG V60, because it also has the hi-fi quad DAC, so you can get very high quality audio with this phone. And if you have a good pair of headphones, they're gonna sound amazing if you turn that quad DAC on. And also, this phone has amazing stereo speakers as well, extremely loud, very good high quality. The rest of the phone is awesome as well. You can also get the dual screen case add-on, and you can pick up the refurbished version I have for around $400, or you can get the new version, I believe, for like 600 or something like that. I'll put those links down below, but it's got a premium design, aluminum frame, glass back. It's IP68 dust and water resistant as well. You also have a massive 6.8-inch OLED display. It's HDR10 plus. 1080p 395 for the PPI. It's a really nice looking display, very colorful. You get really nice deep blacks on here, always on display as well. And you also have Android 10 with the Snapdragon 865. And you also have the Adreno 650. This is a very powerful phone when it comes to gaming and stuff like that. So whatever you want to play, Call of Duty, Fortnite, you can play pretty much on max settings, no problem. And this phone will just blow right through pretty much anything. So this phone also has micro SD support, 128 gigs of internal storage and 8 gigs of RAM. The V60 also has NFC on board as well for your mobile payments, and you also have a pretty decently fast fingerprint scanner under the glass. It's not the fastest, but it definitely works. My only thing with this phone is that there's no face unlock, but the fingerprint scanner, it does work fine. So the V60 actually has some pretty good cameras. It's got a triple camera setup, 64 megapixel standard, 13 megapixel ultra wide with a 0.3 depth sensor. You get 8K video as well as a 10 megapixel selfie. As you can see from the photos, very highly detailed. It gives off some really good natural looking colors, completely the opposite of Samsung's image processing if you by comparison. But I like the pictures on the V60. I think they look great. The front facing cameras also are really nicely detailed as well. It gives off some good shots, and there's also a really good manual mode on the V60, so I've never really felt the need to download any additional software on this phone like Gcam or anything like that, because it really is a pretty good camera, and that is also for video as well. It takes pretty good video too. So the V60 has amazing battery life, but it does depend if you're on 5G. I've never used the phone on 5G because of the area I've lived in, but you got a 5000 milliamp battery with wireless charging, and man, this phone really does last at least 2 days for me. And if you're a heavy user, this is an all-day phone still, so you just get excellent battery life. I've got some people saying they get at least around 10 to 12 hours of screen on time. So if you're a light user, this is a phone that is just going to be crazy on battery life. You guys know I'm a big fan of OnePlus. So this phone on here, an aluminum frame, glass back, IP68 dust and water resistant. You also have a 6.78-inch fluid AMOLED display, 1440p, 120 Hz overall just a beautiful display. 513 for the PPI, very sharp. Now this phone does have the punch hole as well as sort of like a curved glass on here, so it does have a really beautiful looking display. As always, I think the highlight with OnePlus phones is definitely Oxygen OS. If you want a mix between simplicity and customization, this is definitely a phone for you. Like I said, Snapdragon 865, Adreno 650. It's just gonna run through everything, games, the OS. No SD card support, 128 gigs of internal storage and 8 gigs of RAM on here as well. And this phone does have stereo speakers on here, but there's no SD card support and there's no 3.5mm jack, so do note that. You also have NFC on board with a very fast under the display fingerprint sensor as well. I think the 8 Pro still has very good cameras on here, a 48 megapixel standard, an 8 megapixel telephoto with a 48 megapixel ultra wide with a 5 megapixel color filter camera, so technically as a quad camera setup. You do have 4K video, and then you have a 16 megapixel selfie camera as well. And from what I've seen with the shots, it takes pretty decent photos, so I think for anybody you'll be satisfied. You do have a 4510 milliamp battery with 30-watt fast charging, and you also have wireless charging along with reverse wireless charging as well. So the 8 Pro is definitely a phone to consider if you want something that is going to be running Oxygen OS and you just have that really smooth experience. So that's my list. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.